Hey all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today we're going to be joined by a great guest, Mr. Clint Cantwell from AmazingRibs.com. He is one of the lead contributors to a lot of the recipes and information and articles on Amazing Ribs. He's also part of the Pitmaster Club, and I will be back in 1 minute with Clint from Amazing Ribs.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I have a great guest with me today. Comes from AmazingRibs.com, the #1 barbecue website on the internet, as far as I'm concerned. Please welcome Clint Cantwell. He is the main guy as far as recipes and stuff go on there. Clint, welcome to the podcast, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Darren. Pleasure to be here.
How long have you been with Amazing Ribs and in that position you're in right now?
I believe it's coming up on 3 years, but Meathead and I have known each other forever. I bet we've known each other for almost a decade now. So, we've kind of run in the same circles for a very long time. And when he had a need to kind of expand the team a few years ago, he reached out to me, and we've been joined at the hip ever since.
So your position there is, do you do most of the recipes and stuff like that on the website?
Yeah, my official title is Vice President of whatever. So if you ask me what I do, I basically do whatever. I do the majority of the recipes these days. We're also significantly expanding our database of product reviews. You may know that we have the largest database of hands-on smoker and grill reviews that are done by Max Good on the site, but we're also trying to branch out into other products, taking a look at some kitchen appliances, barbecue and grilling tools, basically anything that might be of interest to the audience, really trying to grow those reviews on the site.
Yeah, a lot of people are mixing the cooking methods anymore, and I do a lot of that with the sous vide and smoking and grilling. So I mean, it comes to pass that people try to incorporate it with all different kinds of methods. So I can see a big need for your website to look at other types of appliances that would help with that too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, basically anything you can cook in the kitchen, you can do better on the grill, at least in my opinion. There's really nothing that you can't do outside. So trying to incorporate some of those favorite tools from the kitchen is definitely a way to step up your game.
Especially since they have all these different kinds of cookers anymore, with the pellet grills and, the Kamado type grills. I mean, you can do so much on some of these different grills that you couldn't do before. Everybody thinks of just, cooking on a Weber kettle or a gas grill, and, you can just throw a steak or a burger on it, but there's so much more you can do anymore on the patio. So.
Oh yeah. No, you take, for example, my Memorial Day party. We had family and friends over, and we had 3 different cookers going. We did ribs on a pellet cooker. We did a sirloin roast on a rotisserie that was set on a Weber kettle grill. A really cool device from Carson Rodizio. So it's basically like a rotisserie that you'd see in a Brazilian restaurant.
Yeah, I've seen those.
So we had that going on a Weber kettle, and then we had another Weber kettle going that we sous vide and then grilled some giant tomahawk ribeyes. And and we even finished up with dessert on the grill. So we really had a lot of different stuff going on at the same time in the backyard.
Yeah, sounds great. Now, is your full-time job with Amazing Ribs, or is that just something that you do to help Meathead out, or?
No, it's pretty much full time. We are the largest barbecue and grilling resource in the world, and we actually rival many of the top food websites as well. So it's definitely a full time job for the team, just keeping up with comments, trying to add in new engaging information, recipes, reviews all the time to excite the audience. We've got the Pitmaster Club, which is the paid portion of the site, and that continues to grow by leaps and bounds. So it's
I'm a member.
it's the labor at AmazingRibs.com.
I'm a member. I'm the Pitmaster. I get my newsletter. I see you write a lot of the newsletter articles as well. So
Yeah, that's another one of my duties. I've recently taken over the newsletter as well. So again, vice president of whatever.
Whatever he needs you to do, huh?
Yeah.
How often does Dr. Blonder get involved? Does he pretty much just do the research experiments and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, I don't actually know him personally. Meathead has always done all the work with him, but he's there when Meathead wants to really dive into the science behind some of the different methods. Whether or not to rest meat, how deeply marinades penetrate the meat, all of the real geek out stuff that's really interesting to the readers, but none of us are smart enough to reach those conclusions on our own.
I like diving into a lot of that stuff because to me, I've been cooking for 40 years, and it has to make sense to me. Somebody can't just tell me you got to do it this way because this is the way I've always done it.
Oh yeah.
You have to put mustard on ribs, before you put the rub on, or it won't stick. And it's
Sure.
just things like that don't make sense. So I really love diving into his articles, but
yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, even something as simple as soaking wood chips and wood chunks.
right.
We've got a graphic that shows a cross section of a wood chunk that's soaked for 24 hours, 36 hours, and the actual penetration of the water is minuscule.
So what's your favorite
all
part?
of these myths that kind of grew up around cooking in the backyard and debunking those.
Yeah, I mean, I like that too because, like I said, everything's got to kind of make sense to me. It has to, it's got some of the stuff is black and white, and you can't just tell me it's
Sure.
some kind of magic voodoo.
Oh, 100%.
So what's your favorite part of working for Amazing Ribs?
Man, I'm a really creative-minded person, so I've been creating barbecue and grilling recipes for over a decade now, and I really never duplicate what I'm doing. So it's exciting for me to be able to dive in and to create new things that kind of excite the readers on the site. And to your point, getting them thinking outside of the ordinary, trying some different things, learning new techniques, trying new ingredients, all of that stuff.
So I want to discuss something with you because I don't have, I've talked to some other barbecue guys on my podcast before.
Yeah.
To me, I like all different kinds of barbecue and all different kinds of cooking styles and methods and all different, regional type foods. And barbecue is really one of those that you can go to Texas and it's different than if you go to North Carolina or certain parts of North Carolina,
Yeah, or even any region of the world as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their own method for cooking over live fire, and they all have certain proteins that they use, different sauces. Everyone's got their own spin on it, but definitely region to region, you see it in the U.S.
Yeah, and I like, people always go, well, barbecue is not grilling and grilling's not barbecue. Well, outdoor cooking is outdoor cooking to me. So if you got fire and smoke and some kind of apparatus to cook it on. It can be barbecue. So,
Yep. Meat, fire, smoke, good.
yeah. So I've read a little bit about you, and it looks like you did something called the American Grilled competition on Travel Channel a couple of years back.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good time.
How was that? How was that experience being on the television show? And
It was fun. I've done a few different television things. I do a segment on one of the TV channels here during the summer, but it's always interesting. This was a show that was kind of modeled after Chopped, where you have secret ingredients in each round, and somebody's knocked out each round until you get to the two finalists. So it was the most interesting thing to me was the fact that it was all shot in one day. So given the fact that I won, I think we started at like 6 in the morning, and it was about 10 o'clock at night by the time I finished all of the filming. So it was a long day of cooking and shooting, but it was $10,000. So got to do what you got to do.
yeah, how many competitors were you up against on that?
We started with 4. It was filmed here in Memphis down on Beale Street. So we started with 4 contestants and knocked one out in the first round, another one in the second round, and then it was me and a good friend of mine, Blake Carson, actually the guy that created the Carson Rodizio that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
It was him and I in the final round.
Did he get to use his Rodizio during the competition?
They did not let him. They didn't let him use the physical thing, the motorized
Right.
thing for the skewers, but he did bring the skewers, and he was cooking with those during the competition.
Gotcha.
They let each person bring one special item that they could use during the competition. I think mine was a thermopan.
How many barbecue competitions have you been involved in yourself over the years?
I used to compete a lot. Probably going back 14 or 15 years. I worked in New York for 20 years, working for different public relations agencies and in-house. So to me, competition barbecue was kind of my version of golf.
Right.
So on the weekends, you work nonstop during the week and you want to just get out and relax. So I would go and do contests a lot of the time on my own. And, you're with the same people every weekend. You get to go to different cities or whatever for the contest. And, it's barbecue. So once you got the main proteins on the smoker, it's a lot of just sitting around BSing with friends.
Drinking beer and BSing, yeah.
Yeah, just, watching the fire and hanging out. So I probably used to do about a dozen or 15 contests a year. Now I hardly do any. My competition trailer hasn't been out of the garage in years. And, the only one I did so far this year was Memphis in May.
How different is competition cooking compared to home cooking or just cooking for the family?
Oh, it's a completely different animal. The biggest thing is that you're cooking basically for one bite. The judges are judging multiple entries. So when they open up your rib box, they're really only going to take 1 or 2 bites to judge it on the taste and tenderness of that rib. So that's why when you watch the competition barbecue shows, you see these guys just going over the top with all sorts of squeezed butter and brown sugar and honey,
Johnny Triggs,
layers and layers. Yeah, it looks disgusting on TV, but you're not really going to have much of a shot at winning unless you do that. you want to really over flavor that one bite of meat so it pops in the judge's mouth.
So you're more,
But that said, after you turn in your 6 or 8 rib bones, you really don't want to sit down and eat the rest of those racks of ribs. It's it's diabetes on a bone.
so you're more looking to get their attention so they remember you more.
Yeah, 100%. You're not cooking for your friends and family in the backyard. A traditional Texas salt and pepper brisket is not going to win at the Jack Daniel's Invitational or any local KCBS contest.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I can't get over is that a lot of people think that competition barbecue is people same way people should cook in their backyard, and it's just totally different. I've watched, like you said, some of those shows, and you watch what they do to.
Yeah.
I think it's doctoring the meat or doctoring the just all kinds of
Oh, yeah.
injections and 3 different kinds of honey, agave, like you said,
Yeah.
parquet, and 8 different kinds of rubs with different profiles. And you're like, how can that even taste good? Because it's me being a cook who used to cook professionally back, 20 years ago. You're muddling
Sure.
flavors. That's one of the things they teach you is you don't want to muddle flavors. You don't want to have too much flavor, but it kind of seems like it's the opposite in barbecue competition. So,
Yeah, and it's kind of sad to see because, now the trend has gone towards these super premium Wagyu briskets.
yeah,
And people are taking these gold grade Snake River Farms Wagyu briskets and then injecting the heck out of them with all sorts of things to make them even more beefy tasting and even more moist, and then slicing them and putting a thinned out barbecue sauce on them. So it's in no way, shape, or form even related to true Texas brisket by the time you get it in a box.
right. I think that's one thing that, it was kind of always surprised me to see people like Aaron Franklin judging the barbecue competitions, because his brisket that he cooks at his restaurant is totally different than what they cook at these competitions. So,
yeah, and I think I don't know for certain, but I think that had something to do with him only being on there for a season or two, because, he very much is a purist, and the stuff that a lot of those guys are doing that he has to judge, it's hard to overcome that bias if you're a true aficionado of just simple meat, a little bit of seasoning and fire.
right. Yeah. I mean, that's what judges how well you can cook. Is if you could just take, very little few ingredients and a piece of meat and some wood and smoke and charcoal and turn that thing into something super fantastic without having to dump 18 different types of seasoning on it.
Yeah, 100%.
So being part of Amazing Ribs, you've seen just about every kind of cooker and smoker and grill that's out there. What do you kind of lean towards when you cook at home yourself? What's your favorite type of cooker?
I've kind of weaned back on the back patio. My wife wanted to put some furniture on the back patio. God forbid that there's actually a place to sit back there. So
I'm in the same spot right now.
So I got rid of a few things. I think I'm down to about 10 or 12 different things on the back patio. And it really depends on the mood that I'm in. One of them starts to look a little lonely, so I'll go and cook on the pit barrel cooker because I haven't used it in a while. I've got a beautiful Komodo Kamado that's custom tile finished, and that's always fun to cook on. Honestly, my favorite thing to cook on is my 27.5-inch Weber kettle, because it's just very simple. Weber kettle, Kingsford charcoal. The 27 inches gives you a ton of room to play with. So if you want to do like a 2-zone fire, or do 1 or 2 racks of ribs on there, it just gives you a lot of room to play with. So that's one of my favorites. But also, I'm creating recipes, and with that comes photos. So I'll kind of mix up the cooker just so all of my photos don't look the same.
Yeah. Do you
So they're not all cooked
do you have a
on
stick burner in your
the.
backyard too?
I do not. No, I've got both sizes of the pit barrel cooker. I'm in between gas grills right now, but I think I went about 2.5 years between refills on my propane tank. So I really, even when I have a gas grill, I don't get around to using it much. I've got a pellet cooker, 3 Weber kettles, 2 Kamados, but no stick burners at the moment.
Yeah, I got 2 Kamado Joes. I got the Big Joe and the Classic 2. I got a Camp Chef pellet grill with the sear box, and I use that very rarely. So that's the only thing that's gas powered on my patio. And then I do have a Blackstone, a 22-inch Blackstone griddle that's gas powered. I use that for various things, but most of the time I'm cooking either on the pellet grill or one of the Kamados for sure. I do have a Pit Barrel Junior I use occasionally for ribs or chicken or something like that, but most of the time I'm cooking on either one of my Kamados or the Camp Chef pellet grill. So
yeah, I mean, stick burners are a ton of fun, but the stuff that I have in the bag, I also have a couple of Weber Smoky Mountains because, I think those are just godsend. Once you dial in the temperature on those, I can keep it running for 14 hours.
right.
So, unlike a stick burner where you're always having to kind of play with the fire and stuff, unless you're a real pro, the Jambo guys like Tuffy Stone and those guys that really know how to make them sing. That's a lot of babysitting for me.
One of the things I'm kind of surprised at, talking about the competition guys again, is how many of them are using the pellet grills, and even Myron has got his own line of pellet grills now. So,
Yeah,
you still get in some of the barbecue forums where some of those hardcore stick burner guys will call them the easy bake ovens and stuff. But I'm really surprised at how many people are using these, commercial or competition size pellet grills. So.
Oh yeah, pellet grills in general have just blown up in the last few years. I mean, it's that and the Big Green Egg, or the Traeger and Big Green Egg, are the 2 brands that I hear more whenever I'm just out talking to neighbors and at events in different cities and stuff like that. People have really embraced pellet cookers, and rightfully so. In my mind, it's the convenience of a gas grill, but you're getting the smoke flavor that you get from a charcoal grill or a stick burner.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing right there. It's that convenience, and they don't have to learn a whole lot about it. It's like a lot of people get scared of having to tend to fire because they get that stick burner mentality in their mind that they got to sit there and feed wood to it all the time, and they can't walk away from it. And they get that with a gas grill or a pellet grill. It's they turn a knob, throw the meat on and walk away for a little bit. So.
Yeah, 100%. There's no learning curve to it. So.
Right. And now they got, Wi-Fi and all kinds of different options that they're doing. One of the things I like about my Camp Chef is it's got, I can clean out the pellets real quick and change the flavor. The ash dump is, really easy. So the convenience factor there is I can come home after working all day, throw some food on, be eaten in 45 minutes and not have to worry about, making sure the fire's out and everything. Just shut it off and walk away. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the only thing missing with most of them these days is a true sear capability because, most of them are just a small little firebox that's igniting the pellets, in the very center of the grill. So it's hard to get that true high heat sear that you'd get on a really solid gas grill or a charcoal grill
Yeah.
or a commodity.
Well, that's why I got the Camp Chef, because they have a sear box that you can get that attaches to the side. That's all it's there for. It's gas powered. You turn it on, it gets up to 900 degrees. You sear, smoke it, and then you sear it on the little sear box, and then you're done. So
there you go.
So what's your favorite thing to cook? I know that's a hard question to ask, because I know I've got a few favorites, but what's your favorite, your number one thing that you like to cook when you come home on a weekend and you say, I'm going to cook my favorite food out on the back patio?
Yeah, it's hard for me because, I'm creating recipes all the time. So it's really whatever is top of mind, whether it's a new burger recipe or, a new twist on beef ribs or something. There's really nothing that I've got to have at the end of a hard week. It's also difficult because I'm not like most people where I'm going to work and then grilling on the weekends is a way to relax. I work from home and 2 or 3 days out of the week, most weeks I'm cooking outside. So it's not like, you where you come home Friday night and want to slap a giant ribeye on.
Well, I work from home too, so I'm kind of like you. And also I think it depends, because I know there's some people that they only like to eat certain things, and they have a limited menu. Yeah. My wife's one of them. She's not a big adventurer as far as food goes, but I am. So I'm always probably kind of like you, creating my own new recipes or twists, or I'll see a recipe that somebody did and I'll go, I'm going to kind of change it the way I like it,
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's really part of the fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Going outside of the box, so you're not just doing chicken, hamburgers, and hot dogs. The way that I grew up, and you probably grew up with your parents or grandparents out there doing the same stuff all the time on the grill, which usually meant charred chicken with burnt on barbecue sauce.
Right.
It's dry as a stick.
Or burnt hot dogs and hamburgers. Yeah. Tasted like lighter fluid.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. that was grilling back in the day, where everything had to be cooked well beyond well done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I like to take recipes, and I'm really hard at not following recipes. I look at a recipe and I use it as a baseline to kind of use it as a springboard. Sure. So how do you do it when you start creating your own recipes for Amazing Ribs?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thought process. I've got a ton, a couple hundred cookbooks in my office, and I hardly ever create a recipe, actually go and cook a recipe out of those books. But I look to them for inspiration, and, they're not all barbecue and grilling cookbooks. They could be cookbooks on Italian cuisine or, whatever, and putting my own twist on it, or trying to take stuff that you wouldn't normally think about doing outside. Even like Wednesday meatloaf at home, it makes a heck of a difference if you take that meatloaf and throw it on the pellet cooker. You're elevating it exponentially by doing it outside versus cooking the meatloaf in the oven.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and take a break for a minute here, and then we'll come back, and then we'll discuss some other things that interest me and probably my listeners here. So we'll be back in a minute. Hey, all, I want to welcome again Inkbird as our sponsor for the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird has more than just barbecue thermometers and instant read thermometers that I've talked about before. Inkbird just came out with a Wi-Fi sous vide circulator that I've been using for a few weeks now that works pretty good. It has over 1,000 watts of power, has a app that has many times and temps for meats and vegetables. Also has onboard times and temps for meats and vegetables. Runs really quiet. Fits most regular sous vide containers that are the size of the Innovas. So check it out. Look below. There's a link with a code for 30% off of the Amazon price that makes it under $60 right now till June 5th. So check out the Inkbird Wi-Fi sous vide circulator in the description below. Back to our program. All right, guys, we're back. I got Clint Cantwell here from AmazingRibs.com, and we had a good conversation so far. And one of the things I want to talk about, and one of the things that kind of got me started doing what I'm doing now with the fire and water concept of mixing sous vide and barbecue, is about 3 or so years ago, I ran into an article on Amazing Ribs, and I think Meathead did the first article on it, but I think some of the recipes on it were yours, mixing sous vide and barbecue. And it really got me intrigued because I'd never heard of sous vide before. So it got me looking into it. I actually, got one for Christmas that year and started playing around with it. And I used Amazing Ribs, sous vide Q section for a lot of, my jumping off point. That's kind of grown from there. Now I've got a YouTube channel and a Facebook group and the podcast and stuff. So what kind of started you on it? Was it something Meathead came to you and talked about, or?
Yeah, a little bit of that. I've been around sous vide for a while. My brother is a trained chef and had his own restaurant for a while. And sous vide has been around forever in the professional restaurant space. So, I kind of got my feet wet in his kitchen, learning from the head chef there, and just learning the benefits of the low and slow water bath and why it's used so frequently in the restaurant space. And then, over the last couple of years, the units themselves have not only decreased in price, but decreased in size because, back in the day, the sous vide immersion circulators in most restaurants were huge and they were expensive. So now you can get like a Jewel or a Nova for under $200 and they'll fit in your pull-out drawer in your kitchen. So it's a lot more accessible to home cooks. And, I would say that maybe the Instapot is kind of taken over the top spot for the most hyped kitchen tool right now, but sous vide immersion circulators were definitely one of the top gifts the last couple of Christmases.
Yeah, and I think one of the bad raps that sous vide gets is that people think that you can only make steaks or chicken breast or something with it. I mean, and that's one of the things I've dedicated my whole fire and water cooking concept to, is showing people. I hardly ever do a steak video on my YouTube channel because there's so many of them out there, people using sous vide to make steak. And, sous vide everything is one of the bigger, YouTube groups out there with sous vide. And I would say 2 out of every 3 videos he does is steak. And my whole point is that you can use sous vide for so many different things. And I think once people start realizing that, I've had people in my Facebook group say, well, I had my sous vide in the, drawer for a year and a half. I haven't used it because I thought it was only for making steak, and they pulled it out and started experimenting with it.
Oh yeah. Just play with cooking eggs to different degrees of doneness, or taking whole carrots and sous videing them and then hitting them on the grill. It's hard to get a carrot done perfectly, if you're just doing it yourself, but add sous vide to the mix and you can have the perfect amount of doneness and a little bit of crunch.
Or even, where I use it a lot is getting that, pork loin to 144 degrees, perfectly medium rare, or, close to the more medium, and then putting a nice sear on it. And you can't do that in an Instapot. Instapot, you're cooking it to death, just like you would traditional low and slow barbecue with a brisket. You got to cook it to 200 degrees or it's not tender.
No, pork loin is perfect for it because you got no fat in there. So
chicken breasts and whole chickens and cooking a brisket medium rare. That was one of the things that intrigued me the most. Is I could take a full packer brisket, cook it to medium rare, and then finish it out on the smoker. And it's not the same texture as a low and slow, but it's different. It's something different,
Yeah,
and can be just as good.
Oh, 100%. It's also pretty foolproof. I mean, if you have a guide somewhere, a recipe or something, once you know the temperature to set it to and the amount of time, it's hands off. You can let it go overnight, let it go for a couple of days, and you don't have to deal with it as long as you've got some sort of lid on there to keep the water from evaporating. There's really no concerns. Unless you're in the Bahamas. I will say that Meathead and I ruined a ton of beautiful steaks in the Bahamas because of a power surge that blew out the settings on our immersion circulators. So they basically stopped cooking.
Oh, no.
When we thought that they were going. So 2 hours later, we had to throw out all those good steaks. But normally, if you're in the U.S. cooking in your kitchen, you shouldn't have any issues.
Right. One of the things I've liked to experiment with as well is getting to a certain doneness and tenderness that you can play with. I mean, instead of just cooking something, you can do this with like a London broil per se or a chuck roast, where you can make it super tender, like a filet mignon or a New York strip. You can vary the degree of tenderness on that chuck roast and still make it medium rare. Yeah. So, that's one of the things that really people don't understand that, and it kind of blows their mind once they figure that out.
Yeah, chuck roast is a perfect example. You can cook it to where it's tender, but it slices like a brisket, or you can cook it to where it's fall apart tender and use it for soft tacos or something like that.
One of the things that I still get is some pushback from barbecue purists when you try to mix the two. And a lot of them are, they always throw up that, well, you don't see that, let them use that in competition, which goes back to our competition discussion about what they do to the meat other than using sous vide. And that's what I say. Well, they might as well, with all the other stuff they let them do to the meat.
Yeah, that's not a really winning argument with everything else that goes on with the meat, to your point.
So some of the recipes that you done, I've noticed that you smoke the meat usually after the sous vide cook.
Yeah.
That's one of the big back and forths that happens on the Facebook groups. And I'm with you. I've done it both ways. I've done it so many different ways. I've found that cooking the meat sous vide first, chilling it in an ice bath, or even let it chill overnight. Yeah. Put it on the smoker wet, add a little bit more seasoning, and then spritz it, while it's, 2 or 3 hours smoking, and it gets back up to that sous vide temperature. It comes out perfect. One of the big arguments is, people, I smoke it first and then sous vide it, and then it's like.
But it doesn't even make any sense to me because, the purpose of sous vide is to, cook it over a long period of time at a set temperature, the degree of doneness that you want it at the end, so that you can break down that connective tissue and make it as moist and tender as possible. So why are you going to heat it up first and start the cooking process and then do this long process to make it perfect? And then, like searing it in the beginning and then putting it into a bag and sous videing it, you're losing that that beautiful crust. So, that's why I prefer to do it at the end. Like you mentioned, a water bath is key to sous vide Q, I think, because you're shocking the meat, you're dropping the temperature immediately to a safe level, but it's also giving you room to play with whenever you hit the smoker or grill. Because say you've cooked a steak perfectly, you've sous vide it perfectly to 129 or 132 degrees for medium rare, and you go directly out of that water bath to the grill, and by the time you get a good sear on that steak, the internal temperature is up to 138, 140. So you've gone through all that effort of getting it to a perfect medium rare and then just shot right past that on the grill. Whereas if you throw it into a 50-50 ice and water bath, drop that temperature, then you've got time you can even do a reverse sear on the steak to be able to cook it over indirect heat for a little bit, get maximum smoke penetration to give it some additional flavor after the sous vide bath, and then sear it over direct heat for a beautiful crust.
Right. And I get into this argument all the time because people will think that the smoke will penetrate deep into the meat while it's cooking sous vide. And, I always revert back to, one of Meathead's articles about, how smoke works. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to get deep into the meat. It's mostly a surface, surface treatment, just like most of your seasonings are. And then, on the other hand, you have people say, well, they shouldn't season before the sous vide cook because, it doesn't go into the meat. Well, it still seasons the surface of the meat. So people get some weird ideas in their head. It all goes down to personal preference, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like barbecue. There's a million people that will tell you to cook a brisket fat side down, and there's another million that'll tell you got to cook it fat side up. Everyone's got an opinion, but if it works for you, do it like that.
That's what I always say. I said, here's why I do what I do, and here's how it turns out this way for me, and this is how I like it, and here's why I think that way. And I'll, throw articles from Amazing Ribs, 90% of the time, the information I get from Amazing Ribs, and I say, here's why. If you see what Dr. Blonder says about this stuff and that, and then personally, I've done it this way, and I've done it the other way, and this way it turns out better for me. But you can do it the way you like.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to win that argument again. There would probably only be one barbecue cookbook in the world if there was only one way to cook stuff, But there's thousands of rib recipes out there because there's 1,000 different ways you can do them, and they all taste good at the end.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thought is, different cooking methods, they don't have to stand alone, and you don't have to just cook your ribs the 3-2-1 method. I can make decent ribs without doing it the 3-2-1 method. I can do it probably 8 different ways and have it come out to where if you sat down in front of these 8 slabs of ribs, you couldn't tell the difference between how I cooked one or the other, and they're all going to be delicious.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
So we talked a little bit offline about the International Sous Vide Conference that's coming up in July, and you're hoping to be able to make it over there with Meathead.
Yeah, Meathead will definitely be there, and my goal is to make it for the last day or the last 2 days, depending on how some other plans can be rearranged.
Yeah, I was supposed to make it out there, that I had too much going on this year. They kind of invited me like after I had all these other plans, but I hope to make it out there next year. But I know Jason and Mike real well, and they were actually on my podcast last week discussing that. So Jason's got a lot of experience. He's written a bunch of books on sous vide, and they're excited to have Meathead and you out there. That's for sure. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty big conference for the first one that they've ever had. So.
Yeah, it's great to see all the love that sous vide is getting these days. It's definitely exciting.
Do you get to go out and do speaking engagements too, or does Meathead kind of do that all himself?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends. I travel a bit during the year. Uh, I try to go to all the major barbecue contests during the year, not only just to catch up with friends, but to shoot video and do interviews and to network and things like that. Uh, I do some television cooking segments, things like that. But no, I don't speak at very many conferences. I've got this slow Southern drawl, so it's kind of hard to hype people up when you're a slow talking Southerner like me.
Meathead's got that Chicago going for him, so.
Yeah, and he's much more interesting to listen to than I am.
So when you go to these conferences with Meathead, are you usually there just for backup to help cook, or what usually goes on when you guys are out there together?
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to do a conference together yet, so this sous vide one would definitely be a lot of fun. Well, no, I take that back. We did the Grill Greats event a couple of years ago down in the Bahamas together, so it was fun for him and I to actually be able to cook together and kind of riff off of each other, because we're both pretty creative when it comes to cooking on the grill. So he had some neat techniques that he broke out, and I've got a few of my own. So it's fun to play off of each other.
So do you have to get up to Chicago to meet with him much, or do you guys just kind of do everything by the phone and email and all that? Or
yeah, pretty much just virtually. I mean, that's the way that a lot of business is going these days, and especially with the website. I mean, there's really no reason that we need to be face to face during the week, when we're running a website. So, we're talking either by email or by phone pretty much 5 days, 6 days a week, bouncing ideas off of each other, fixing issues with the site, coming up with some new creative content. Something's always going on between us.
Yeah, and you don't need to be face to face to do a lot of that stuff. That's for sure. Not anymore.
No, it benefits him. He doesn't have to look at my ugly face all day. So.
Were you able to get to the HPB convention down in Dallas this year? Or?
I was not. It's been a couple years since I've been able to go. It's, I always seem to be busy around that time of year. Something's always going on, so it's hard for me to make it. We usually try to get somebody to the Hearth and Patio show, though, just to shake hands and see what's new out there, and just to keep a dialogue going with all the manufacturers.
I think Max went down there this year, from what I understand.
Yeah, he's usually there. He's the main face when it comes to outdoor cookers and AmazingRibs.com.
Yeah, I've read a bunch of his reviews, so I know he goes over them with a fine-tooth comb usually.
Oh yeah, he's the only person in the world whose full-time job is rating and reviewing barbecue grills and smokers. So that's a pretty cool job to have. So what is your favorite thing to sous vide and grill?
Well, to me, one of the favorite things I like to do is chickens. Actually, I like to take a spatchcock chicken, cook it at like 148 degrees for 3 or 4 hours, and then toss it on the either the pellet grill or the Kamado, just to get some smoke and get the skin crisped up. I found it doesn't dry the chicken out as much as just cooking it on the grill. It retains a lot.
Yeah.
I found that it retains a lot of the moisture, and it's kind of like, from what I understand, it's like the stall. It's like the evaporative cooling, since the internal temp of the chicken is at a steady, stable temperature. Once you throw it on that hotter grill, it doesn't rise as fast as if it would if you threw it on cold. And I don't know why it is. I think I can figure it's something to do with similar to the stall on a brisket or a pork butt. It's that evaporative cooling where it gets to a certain temperature and it just kind of sits there for a while, So, but yeah, I like chicken is probably one of my favorite. I like to do pork butt a lot. I do that for get-togethers and stuff all the time, and people rave about it. So, beef ribs.
Yeah, I think the most interesting one that I've done is bottom round roast, because I've got the recipe on Amazing Ribs, but if anything kind of speaks to what sous vide Q can be, it is the bottom round roast, because it's a dirt cheap cut of beef that really isn't good any way that you cook it. It just has no fat in it. Doesn't work well with a slow cooker. Doesn't work well over direct high heat. But throw it into a temperature controlled water bath for a long time and let all that connective tissue break down, and let it become tender, and then finish it off with some direct heat and smoke. I would compare it to filet mignon when it's done.
It's funny you say that, because my favorite thing that my wife likes that I cook, if you would ask that, I would have told you top round, because it's cheap, like you said. It's just like bottom round roast. But it's tough if you try to cook it traditionally. But you throw that in the sous vide at 132 degrees for 36 or 48 hours. It comes out filet tender, and I can toss it on the grill and still comes out medium rare and nice and tender, and get a nice char on it. And she loves that. That's her favorite thing. And it's not ribeye. It's not, beef ribs. She just loves that.
Yeah, but I guarantee if you sliced it and put it on somebody's plate that didn't know what the cut was and how you cooked it, they would say that it's filet mignon, or a really expensive tender cut of beef, the spinalis or something like that. So
yeah, that's the only thing that, like you said, there's just not a lot of fat on it, so there's not a ton of flavor, but it's still. You could take. I wouldn't have it any other way. Now I've never really liked eating London broil or top round before until I got the sous vide. So, but now my wife's like, make that. I like that. So. But yeah, I like experimenting with things. I like to make, beef ribs and make them medium rare and make them super tender. So.
Yeah. And the other thing that we didn't really touch on, we touched on quick chilling food after sous videing it. But the other great benefit of that is that you can get all of your food cooked to perfection ahead of time if you're having a bunch of people over for dinner or whatever. Whereas if you're cooking a pork butt or a brisket or even ribs, just doing them on the smoker, you can end up with guests waiting around for 3 or 4 hours because that brisket was stuck in the stall longer than you expected.
Oh, yeah.
But if you sous vide it first and then throw it in an ice water bath, you can put it in the fridge for a couple days. When the guests get there, put it on the smoker over indirect heat. You don't have to get it back up to 200 degrees or whatever, just so it's warm enough that it's got a pleasant mouthfeel and it's got some smoke.
Exactly.
And it makes your life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, and that's another thing that really got me excited about sous vide is back, a couple of years ago, you had all these barbecue temperature controllers that people are using for their, smokers and the Kamado grills, all these $200-300 temp controllers so they could sleep during the night, and it's like, I'm just going to spend $80 on a sous vide machine and don't have to worry about it,
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, yeah, there's a lot of different things out there. And like I said, I've loved since I've been playing around with sous vide and barbecue, I love cooking regular barbecue as well. And, it's just another option. And I think once people figure out that they can combine the two, and there's so many different ways you
Yeah.
can, they start to get tight. That's why it's growing so well. But I really appreciate you having you on, and I really appreciate all the articles that you've done on sous vide and barbecue on the website, because, like I said, I took a lot of inspiration from that, and it was one of the first things, and one of the things I always suggest to people go to, not just the sous vide Q section, but also to some of the other sections, like we talked about, how smoke works and all that stuff. That Amazing Ribs is just really good at taking that myth and, some of the, one of the things that Meathead's really big on is, knocking those, myths to the ground and just say, look, here's why this is this and that. So it's, Amazing Ribs is a really great resource. That's one of the biggest things I always suggest people go to check out. And your articles on the sous vide Q are another reason I go there as well and send people there. So,
well, I appreciate it, and definitely folks should check out the Pitmaster Club as well, because there's a lot of great dialogue that goes on behind the scenes among members, and a lot of them are really, really knowledgeable about the sous vide process as well. So it's fun to get in there and kick around ideas with like-minded folks.
Yeah, I think the Pitmaster Club is probably one of the most well worth it things I can think of out there. I think it's $24 a year or something.
Yeah, it's very little compared to what you get out of it. And
oh yeah, it's I spend that on a month on stupid stuff that I don't ever use. But yeah, the Pitmaster Club is for what you have to pay for it is amazing, and you just get so much stuff from it. You can get as much or as little out of as you want, but there's so many, like you said, people on there with knowledge besides you and Meathead. But there's so much information in the Pitmaster Club that you could sit there for months at a time and not get through it all. So,
100%. Yeah, that's how I learned how to cook competition style barbecue back in the day. Going to forums like that and picking people's brains, because like 10, 12 years ago, you didn't have all the competition barbecue shows, or there's a cooking class any direction you can throw a stone in, you're going to hit a competition barbecue cooking class. So they're definitely great places to go and learn from other people.
Yeah, that's what all these barbecue competition guys do on the off season.
Yeah.
They teach cooking classes.
Yeah, it's a good source of income. They definitely know what they're doing.
Right. Well, I want to thank you again for joining me, and I'm glad we got to squeeze this in, and I look forward to having Meathead on when he gets back from the sous vide conference in July. He promised me he'd come on and we could discuss sous vide and barbecue a little bit more, but I really want to thank you for your wealth of information and all that you do for Amazing Ribs, and again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Darren, and we will talk again soon.
I'm sure we will. Thanks again, and thanks for joining us, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, follow us on the Fire and Water Cooking YouTube channel, and I will talk to you again. Well, thanks for listening to this episode, guys. I want to thank Clint Cantwell again from Amazing Ribs. Make sure you check out AmazingRibs.com for all your barbecue and sous vide Q information. Follow the Fire and Water Cooking channel on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.